Um, First of all, welcome. Thank you guys for attending. My name is Tim Bennett. I'm the Director of Player and Coach Education at Trace. And this is probably our fifth or sixth one of these type of webinars. And I'm really excited about this particular one because between the guest and I, we have Diego, and I don't mean to do this to you, but we have over 50 years of Division I playing and coaching experience. Yes, I guess
we're not getting any younger. Let's just
we're kind of that old, but yeah, and we've covered 4 out of the 5 Power Fives, couple of G5s in there, some other conferences. So this is really going to be kind of a fun conversation tonight. But I'll go ahead and I'm going to let Diego introduce himself here.
Yeah, welcome everyone. Thank you, Tim. My name is Diego Bocanegra. If you recognize my last name, yes, I have a younger brother who was the captain of the U.S. national team for 6 years and played in 2 World Cups. But so we're a soccer family. I just retired from coaching recently in January. The last 5 years, I was the head coach at the University of Houston. That's why I'm still repping my UH shirt. I was at Notre Dame before that, but I have coached collegiate soccer at the NCAA Division 1, 2, and 3 levels on both the men's and the women's side, because like Tim alluded to, I've been doing this that long. So I'm happy to be here.
Good. I hate how we have to age ourselves. That's the worst part about this. But given all that experience, and this is a great time of year to do this. With college seasons kicking off, oftentimes we sometimes forget about recruiting during the competitive season, and I think it's even a better time to do it. So the timing with a lot of seasons starting, preseasons, tournaments, and of course high school too, the timing couldn't be better for this. And so what we're really going to do today is we're going to talk about, I think, the current college landscape, and more importantly, how we can kind of stick, or how we can kind of compete within it, regardless of what league, what club, whatever, what kind of levels the playing field here. And we've all seen this statistic, and I know Diego is very, very familiar with this as well, is playing college soccer is not easy. And more importantly, I feel it's gotten more difficult since COVID. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of the reason is there were different rules across the country. Budgets were hit all across the country. It was just a difficult time. And on top of that, there was a full year where nobody used a year of eligibility. So now instead of 4 classes being recruited, it's really 5, because that one class or anyone that was already in school didn't use a year of school. So if you're an incoming freshman, you're not only competing against your class, but you're competing against 5th year grown men and women that want to stay in college. So it's absolutely gotten more difficult.
And I think the interesting thing post-COVID from the landscape perspective is that we're learning how to get recruited, and college coaches are learning how to recruit in real time. I mean, and you're right. We've got obviously these massive financial issues. Some schools are kind of getting back to normal. Some schools are still really struggling. You've got the introduction of NIL, which is now really kind of ramping up, especially with the 2024s and below. You've got the increased uses of the transfer portal, largely because of this extra COVID year, but some kind of reduction of some really good rules. All the conference realignment. I don't know if you well, obviously your former school, how now U of H is an immediate conference realignment. Do you think that's impacting what's going on?
I do. I think it's not going to impact soccer as quickly as it's impacting, football and basketball. But all those things that you mentioned definitely play a role. I work for a company that part of our company works in the NIL space. And so we're seeing student athletes make decisions sometimes on their name, image, and likeness and what they're going to make. And believe it or not, I think it's like 43% of athletes now have the opportunity, whether you're a revenue sport or not, to do that. And so that all plays in a factor for the top athletes. But even just your everyday rostered college soccer player, there's opportunity to make money now. And so the rules are just constantly changing. And that's what we're here to talk about.
And these two questions came in, and I think they're really kind of spot on. One of the question was, do you think the landscape is going to settle for current high school freshmen? So they would be the class of 2026. Do you feel like everything's going to kind of settle down by then?
Absolutely. I do. I think it's already starting to level off. A lot of student athletes are realizing that it's not so easy. The most recent statistics that I've read of students that went in the transfer portal last year that were college soccer athletes only, I think, depending on if it was men's or women's, it was anywhere between 40 and 50% did not find a new home. So the grass is not always greener, which means I think people are starting to realize I can't just go in the transfer portal and automatically find a new home. And so it's going to take time, but I think over the next probably 18 months, it'll get back to a lot closer than it was pre-pandemic.
Yeah, I agree. Once the COVID years kind of flush their way out, I think that will settle. I think you'll get a little bit more stable NCAA legislation coming through over the next 18 months. So I do feel it will settle down. And the other question that came about, and I really like this question. Do you think it's easier for girls or boys to get recruited?
I think it's different. I mean, like I said, I've coached on both the men's and the women's side. For whatever reason, and I think part of it is girls mature faster and there are more scholarship opportunities on the women's side. And so it seems like there are more opportunities for women, but I think they're the same. I just think they happen at different times. I think the girls' side, they start the recruiting process sooner, where on the guys' side, if you're into your senior year, you could still end up anywhere from Division 1, 2, or 3 at a very, very good school.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think there's a different timeline for men and women. I think with the men, the hardest part is, of the 87 Power 5 schools, only 36 sponsor men's soccer.
Right.
So that in itself creates a much different type of obstacle. But I think at other divisions, the opportunities are just as great. Pool is a little bit deeper on the men's side than it is on the women's side. But I still think if players work at it, the gender doesn't matter. We can create as many opportunities as we want to create.
And that I agree with 100%. And one other caveat I would throw in there, on the men's side, with the rise of bigger and more MLS academies, more male players at the top levels are choosing to go directly to the pros, which dilutes the pool a little bit to go to college, which actually gives those of you trying to go to college a better chance on the men's side. But I think you hit it nail on the head. The more effort you put in, the more exposure you get, and we're going to talk about some of that, the better chance you have of being recruited to college, because it's not just about being good. It's about being seen.
No, you're right. And that's the one thing I think we kind of forget. And I do think college coaches kind of forget too, is the pool is really, really deep across both. And a lot of college coaches, they may not have the budget, they may not have the times to really explore these player pools. And I think that's kind of what we're really trying to get at, is we work at it, we can eliminate some of these barriers. We can eliminate different geographic barriers. We can eliminate different regulations. There's a lot and competitive levels too. Do you think that plays into it here too, Diego? Like where you play, things like that?
Yes, one of the things I've seen trending, and it's kind of like a pendulum. Right before the pandemic, I felt that because recruiting was getting earlier and earlier on both the men's and the women's side, it was becoming more regionalized, where if you were able to go out and see a player, it was easier to do that. And the reason I say the pendulum swinging back with the improvement in technology and video, that kind of takes that geographic barrier away. And now it's starting to get back to, well, I have video, so I can see anyone in the world. I can see anyone in the country, and then pick and choose my times to go see those people play live. So yeah, I would say before it was really getting geographic regions, but now it's kind of swinging back to, here we go.
Yeah. And I think that's good, because it kind of leads into a way to, I think, eliminate. I won't say eliminate, because we can't eliminate some of these barriers, but we sure can overcome them.
Sure.
And I think tech is the best way to do it. It's the best way to open up opportunities across all three NCAA divisions, NEIA, and junior colleges.
Absolutely. So I just really quickly, I know many of my friends or when I was at the Division II or Division III level, like you're alluding to, and I know you're going to get into this, is we didn't have the budgets to travel across the country. And so we relied on video and technology. So yeah, I think you're right. It breaks down those barriers at least.
Was there a particular player that comes to mind that all college coaches, like, it's funny, they all pride themselves on this diamond in the rough, right? Is there something is there one player that was completely off of the radar that you found through either video identification, any type of out of the norm means that you can think of?
I don't know that it's out of the norm, but I have two occasions. One, I'll talk about Emma Clark. She's about to start her 5th year at the University of Houston. She just got named on the United Soccer Coaches list of top 35 defenders to watch. And the first time I saw Emma play live was in our first practice session at the University of Houston. She's from New Zealand. So we didn't have the time or the money to go down there, but because she had good video, she sent video clips, and that turned into us wanting more and started conversation and dialogue and Zoom, and the personalities worked, everything worked out. And she got to Houston, and by a few games into her freshman year, she was in the starting lineup, and now she's a captain leader all conference. And like I said, going into her 5th year this year.
What made you take the chance on, like, what was it about her video? What was it that kind of pulled you, like, you know what, this will be okay?
A lot of things, but technique, her ability on the ball, there was no way to get around that. She just had such soft feet. I mean, she had the size and athleticism. She's a 5'11" center back. So that stood out. I mean, you just see her standing next to people, but just as important, the competition level she was playing. She was sending semi-pro games where she was playing up a couple of years against better competition and either hanging with them or being better than them. And so I think that is huge, because look, in New Zealand, she didn't have MLS Next, GA, ECNL, NPL, whatever the initials are here. So she had to play against players that were older than her and bigger, stronger, better than her. And it wouldn't have done me no good if she's beating kids her own age. That wouldn't have shown me that she could take that next level. So that probably stood out more than anything to me.
That's interesting, because we actually got a question here, and the question revolves around the choosing to recruit a player solely off of video versus watching a player play live? Is obviously circumstances dictated something a little different. She was international. I get that. Do you think that, have we evolved enough as talent identifiers where we should be able to identify players solely off of video, or is it a combination of the both, or should it just be live? What's your read?
I think in a perfect world, it's a combination of both. I truly believe the way I did it and the way a lot of my colleagues that I still speak with do it, the video is the foot in the door. It is where you pique our interest. If I get a good video, I'm going to either ask for more video or ask when you're playing. So a video can get me to come want to watch you play live, wherever it is, whether it's locally, regionally. And look, I will say this, it doesn't matter if it's Division 1, 2, or 3. There's usually a big regional tournament within driving distance, whether it's a surf cup on the West Coast to Disney on the East Coast, PDA Jeff Cup, whatever it may be, Texas Shootout. There's different big showcases around the country that all of the local Division 1, 2, and 3s are all going to go to. And so you pique our interest with video, and then we want more video and we want to watch you play. That's how I feel. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I think video can be an introduction. It can open the door, and it can also help to close the door. And by close the door, I mean it can seal the deal. And actually, the question, this is a really good timing question from someone, is what is a good video? What does attract your attention?
Yeah, I think a good video is the same as a good in person. Show me what you do that's better and different than someone else. Are you a central midfielder with unbelievable vision? Well, show me that and make sure the video is going to show before and after the play. Are you a winger that can take people one-on-one? Are you a center back that wins everything in the air? It doesn't matter what you do. Show your strengths in that video, that you're a specialist, that here's how I'm going to make your program better.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. The playlist is the analogy, and I don't fish, and so I don't know why I use this analogy, but it really is the bait on the hook.
Right.
It gets them interested. Now, the ability to dive a little further in, jump into full game video, understand the competitive level, understand the defensive resistance, and then that keeps them in the boat, right? And that maybe opens up live evaluation opportunities. But I think a good video, a good playlist, it has to showcase exactly what you said. It has to bring something different to that program.
Absolutely.
True. So these are kind of some things that we often talk about is, and you alluded to it earlier here, Diego, is the best thing about our player pools is that they are becoming deeper and deeper and deeper. Clubs are getting, and coaches are getting really, really good about developing talent.
Yep. And
you alluded to the exposure part. Can you kind of expand on that here a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, you can be the best player in the world, but if nobody knows about you, then you're not going to be recruited, or you're not going to make it to that next level. So really, one of the things I used to say is you need to recruit the places you want to go just as much as they're recruiting you. Don't wait for us. You have more time than we do. We've got a finite amount of time. We're sifting through, we'd get hundreds and sometimes even in the thousands of emails in a month, where you can be persistent. You can recruit some of those. But really, the goal is to be seen. And so how do you do that? Whether it's video, whether it's camps, whether it are the big showcases, you've got to find a way to get in front of us so that we get a chance to see you. And that's what I mean by that.
Yeah.
So
I think you're right. I think a lot of the players, the recruiting process is sometimes can be a little bit overwhelming. There's a
Sure.
lot of unknowns with it. And if you're not like a youth national team member, for instance,
Right.
you're gonna have to knock on a door a lot of times before you get an answer.
Yes.
And I do think one thing that, and I just went through this as with Christopher. He's a golfer.
Okay.
He golfs at the University of Nebraska Omaha. So we went through this COVID recruiting stuff, and he got really frustrated when he never got responses. And it was almost like I had to keep kind of pushing him to keep fighting. And I do think a lot of players, when they send out emails, for instance, or they create these great videos and they send them out and they don't get responses, they stop.
Right. Yeah. And that's probably the number one mistake that I see.
Mm-hmm.
If you send the video at the wrong time, and there's no way for you to know that, you might send me the most amazing video, the best written email, and I'm about to open it and I've got a player crisis. Somebody got hurt that day and I'm taking them to the doctor, or you have no idea all the things that could happen. But persistence is a key here, because if you send me that email and you don't get a response, and then you send me another one a couple of weeks later to follow up, and then next time you have a showcase, you send me another email. And now, because most email boxes are set up to receive, if you get one email from somebody, and I usually say reply all, so they'll see it's the second email or the third or the fourth or the fifth. At some point, just being a human being, you feel bad. Holy moly, they've sent me 5 emails. I've got to respond. Even if it's my assistant coach, somebody, I've got to let them know, hey, I'm really busy right now. Keep going. I appreciate it. Versus if it's one and done, I may never see that again. So that persistence does make a difference. And I will say this, you alluded to it, that top tier of student athlete, they're going to get recruited. But that next tier down, sometimes that persistence is the only difference between player A and B. If I watch them play, they're nearly identical. But this one is really, really recruiting me. I can tell they're invested. They want to come to my school. Well, I'm going to take that person over the one that, hey, I'm going to send out one email and hope that I'm good enough.
No, you're right. I was just thinking, when I coached in the Pac-12, there was a player who every Monday she would send me an email and it would always include a video. And man, these videos, it was like Pixar, or they were like Steven Spielberg produced. These things were awesome. And after I hadn't had the chance to see her play. And so after about 5 months of this, I gave in. I'm like, fine, I'll go. And I ended up flying to LA, watching her play, and I ended up recruiting her. And she ended up to be at the University of Arizona. But I had kind of written it off, but she didn't stop.
Right.
And I think that's a really big key to recruiting is, yes, there will come a time where no will mean a no.
Yes.
But you'll understand that. But initially, when you start this process, the more that you recruit a school, the more likely they're going to recruit you. And I can't stress that enough. And I do agree. It's funny, like the best. I know Charles is going to get mad because I'm going to go unfiltered, but I'm going to go unfiltered. So I think a college roster can be divided up in thirds. You got your top 20%, you got 60%, you got another 20%. I think the best players that I have recruited are not the ones that are easily identified. And anybody can go to a field, sit down, and pick out the best players on that field.
Right.
It really is easy.
It doesn't take talent to do that.
No, but it's that next group which end up to be the most important part of a program. And those are the ones that I think really invest and get college coaches to turn their direction. And I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of my.
I agree. No, I'm with you 100%, because the better school or the better tradition you've been at, that 20% may be a little bit bigger. You know, when I was at Notre Dame,
Yeah.
our
A
20%
little different.
it was a little different, where, you know, we had youth national team players fighting to get on the field for playing time. But outside, you know, those top 10 schools, that is where you know, when I was at Cal State Fullerton, we won the conference because of our depth. And that depth came from that middle chunk that we're always fighting and growing and better. And a lot of those ended up into that top 20% of the ones carrying the load. And those were the players that most often were the second tier kids that I was talking about out of high school that became top tier kids in college because of the effort, the energy that they put in the recruiting, as well as once they got to school.
Yep, I do. I think the more you invest, the more ROI you're going to get. And it starts right with the recruiting process all the way through. I call them culture kids.
Yes.
Because they're the ones that define your culture, and they're the ones that grow your culture.
Absolutely.
And a lot is based on that recruiting process. And two really good questions came in. First is, what's the best length of a video to not to overwhelm a coach?
Yeah, I would say for your initial video, 3 minutes or less, because realistically, we don't have the time. I'm probably going to watch the first minute, and if I like what I see in the first minute, I'll watch the next 2. Anything else, it's going to be too much. And you can send me a 10-minute video, I'm probably only going to watch 90 seconds. Unless I really like it, then I'll go on. But keep it short. That way, you literally are just putting your highlights in there. Any longer, you're running out of highlights.
Yeah, I think kind of that 3-minute window is ideal. And we haven't talked a lot about Trace, but I think this is a great interjection into Trace, especially Trace ID is the one. I believe Trace ID actually enhances a college coach's recruiting process, because we've got a feature within the platform that allows coaches to go right from a specific second in a highlight into the full game video and back again, where they can watch moments build, they can watch moments play out. So the ability to kind of toggle back and forth from that, I think, enhances, but that playlist is the key, those initial moments, for sure.
Agreed.
This is a good age. I like this question. What's the appropriate age to start getting kids to send videos or getting on their radar?
Again, it's different on the men's and the women's side. I think on the women's side, you know, second semester freshman year is the earliest. But really it is probably your sophomore year to start getting on the radar, because of the rules now, we're not even allowed to contact you or have contact from you until June 15th going into your junior year. So anything before that, you haven't fully matured, but at least, you know, heading into that June 15th, if you have, you know, a year to 6 months ahead of that where you can start getting on the radar, I think that's fine. And then the same, you know, mid to late sophomore year for the men's side, but realistically they're recruiting juniors and seniors. So it's okay to get on the radar, but just know that you're probably going to be on the back burner until that school gets to where they are in the recruiting process.
Yeah. I approach this from kind of a development aspect too. I think I agree with your timelines. I think they're spot on. I also think that the way the recruiting process works out, a lot of players don't get actual practical experience within it until it's too late. And what I mean by that is, all of a sudden, June 15th, junior year rolls around, everyone's knocking on the door. Oh, by the way, you've got 12 hours to decide. And I think sometimes starting a little bit earlier, knowing the NCAA rules, getting kind of used to sending out playlists, kind of dealing with that. I think there's some practical education in that. Now your list of target schools will kind of adjust accordingly, but I like practicing within it. I think it helps for a much better decision towards the end, because we just don't get that life experience. So I think starting a little bit earlier does help a
Now,
little bit.
let me clarify. Because we were talking about video, that's where my head was.
Yeah.
As far as reaching out and sending emails and attending camps, I 100% agree with what you said. As far as the more practice you get, the better you're going to be when you actually can get responses from those coaches. So to clarify, I was really just talking about the video portion of it, but the emails in the process, absolutely. I don't know that you could start too soon, other than you want to at least try to enjoy the front part of your freshman year and understand what high school is going on before you're even thinking about college. That's all.
Maybe get your driver's license, maybe something like that.
Sure.
Here's a good logistical question: is how do you find the right person to email at a particular program?
I have a simple answer for that. Go to the website and email every one of the coaches on that staff, because you just never know. Some head coaches handle all the recruiting, some assistant coaches. I always asked our recruits, add myself, add both of my assistants, because I may be too busy, but one of my assistants is purely in charge of recruiting. And since you have no way of knowing, put all three coaches from that one school on the same email. You don't want to blast a bunch of schools, but all the coaches from that one school, which you can find on their website every single time.
Yeah, no, I say give love to all of the staff.
Exactly.
And essentially, I mean, maybe an assistant who's not necessarily involved with the recruiting process a lot, you can make a connection, start to build that relationship, and that assistant can also be very influential down the line.
Absolutely.
So I agree. I view it wholeheartedly. We've got two really good questions. Yes, we'll deal with the camp one first. This one is great, and this is from a former Division I athlete who played at Louisville. I spent a decade at the University of Kentucky, so I'll try to handle this with kid gloves here. But he's asking about camps and showcases. That when he played, in order to get noticed, he would attend camps at various schools that he was interested in. Is that still viable today?
Absolutely. Camps are the one place where college coach is actually allowed to coach you. So we had, I would say, at my last three schools, Houston, Notre Dame, and Cal State Fullerton, every year we had 1 to 3 or 4 in a good year players that we never even knew about. They showed up at camp, and then that's jump started their recruiting process, and then they ended up on our roster within a year or two. Because we get to see their training habits. We get to see how they work, what they do. But not only that, they get to work with us to see if it's a good fit. So one of the things I would just like to say about camps, look at how many coaches and what's the coach to camper ratio. For example, at Houston, we did 2 types of camps. We did one camp where we capped it at like 50, and it was just our staff, because I felt over the course of that, we could give a proper evaluation to all 50 of those, potential recruits. Then we had bigger camps where we'd have up to 150, but we'd also have guest coaches in. So we'd have 6 to 8 guest coaches. So now they're getting exposure to coaches and we brought them in from Division 1, 2, and 3. And so that they had a better chance. They were getting more exposure to more coaches and getting a good look.
Yeah, I think that's the right format. I think initially when you start to go to ID camps, let's say your freshman year, second semester, or right around that time for both boys and girls, I think you want to go to these larger camps, as just like you mentioned, that have multiple staffs there.
Right.
That you get exposure to all different types of level. And those are questions that college coaches can answer when you ask them specifically about camps. And then I think as players progress through the recruiting timeline, then we can be a little bit more strategic in what camps we actually attend based on attention and based on maybe our parameters have changed. Maybe I don't want to go so far away. I want to go a little bit closer to home. So I think it's good to start out very, very general, really big camps. And then as we grow and mature during the process, then then narrow down a little bit.
Agree, 100%.
There's a couple really good ones, and I'll get to this one here momentarily because I think that kind of leads into some other things I want to talk about. Should parents or the players reach out to college coaches?
That's an easy one for me. I'm not going to be recruiting the parent. I'm not going to be coaching the parent. We want to hear from the potential recruit. And if they are not old enough or mature enough, then maybe you're starting the process too early. So I know it's a lot to ask for. Now, I will say this. We want the parents involved because unless there are independently wealthy young student athletes, the parents are going to help foot the bill, whether it's a scholarship and just transportation back and forth. So we want the parents involved, but we can tell if it's an email written by a student athlete or a parent. We want to hear from them, and it's okay. Let them stumble, let them do whatever. We'll loop the parents in. We want to see their initiative.
Yes, I and actually just going through this process, and I say this on my workshops. I don't think college coaches should be allowed to recruit unless they've gone through the process as a parent. I really, really believe it, because I learned
being on the other side.
Oh my gosh, we think we know when we're college coaches, but we really don't. And so that was a really eye-opening experience for me. And the way that I kind of view a parent's role is that they're the guardrails, but the person driving the car has always got to be that player. And we can guide them, but they've got to take this initiative. They've got to be the one that develops the relationship, because no matter what we think, mom and dad aren't going back to college. Right. We want to go, man, I'd love to return, but we're not. So it does have to be player led. And yes, mom and dad, sometimes that's like getting blood out of a stone, because these kids have so much going on with training, just regular high school, just being a normal kid. And now you start to throw on the ability to have to work, but the rewards are going to pay off for themselves. And that's another thing I feel really strongly about Trace ID is Trace ID is a really efficient way to maximize players' video communication with someone. There's some great ones. This is actually kind of fun, and we're way off of the rails. Sorry, Charles. But how many colleges should be in a player's target list, let's say their sophomore year?
You know what? I always say start big and start to narrow. You gave a great example of go to the larger ID camps, because you'll start getting the feedback. If you start big, have some dream schools, have some realistic schools, and have some fallback schools, and start contacting them. Your list, it might be 10, it might be 30. But once you start getting out there, you'll start getting feedback, and that'll start narrowing you. If what you think are your realistic schools are all top 40 D1 schools, and you're not getting responses from any of them, your list is probably off. But once you start getting feedback, okay, maybe I've got a couple of these mid-major Division 1s, a ton of Division 2s, maybe that's my sweet spot, and you can start to narrow it from there.
I do think it's important to cast a big net early. And then as you grow within the process, you're going to change. What a player is like at 15 to compare to what they are at 16 is that they're two different people. So chances of them liking the same school or the same collegiate opportunity aren't going to be the same within the next 12 months.
Yeah.
Could change week to week, right?
Yeah.
There's two related questions, and I like it, and I'm going to loop them together, and they both kind of deal with how can club coaches help. and and not just like a club coaches network or an educational, hey, these are the rules, this is what you have to do. How can they help market their players?
Yeah, I really think you have to know and understand the landscape as a club coach. I'll give you an example. I remember when I first took over at Houston, and the first thing I did was I called every one of the local clubs. I didn't care if it was a top tier club or just your very local club. I wanted to get in contact with all those coaches. And a couple of them said, "Oh man, I got this player that's great for you. She's going to be a perfect fit." Awesome. When was the last time well, I haven't seen your team play in 4 years. Well, how do you know she's going to be a good fit? So I think part of this is club coaches helping your players understand the game by going to the game. You're gonna have an option of some schools. I don't care if it's a junior college or a Division III school or a big Division I school in your neighborhood. Club coaches need to take your teams to go watch these games play. It's a great learning tool, one. Two, you get to see the level, and now you can have educated conversations. If I called I had a different coach like, you know what, I went to 5 games last year, and this year I went to your first 2. What a difference this has made already. Here's why I think this person is a good fit. She plays just like your number 6, but I think she's got a little bit better technique. Okay, now I'm listening. My team, you see that. So club coaches need to invest in themselves and their teams by knowing kind of the college landscape.
I think you're right. Club coaches are so important within this process, but oftentimes, and you want to make sure that, as Diego, that you are educated. I can't tell you the number of times someone would come up to me, look at the logo on my chest that I was wearing, and say, "Hey, I got someone for your program." And okay, we're all ears. And as the conversation kind of rolls, yeah, they've never seen us play,
right,
or they don't understand our roster. They're acting in the kid's best interest, and I get that.
Sure.
And that's kind of the the spur of the market. But it is important to realize the audience, is the player that I'm recommending good? Are they a good fit for that? Are they a good fit for that, that particular program? And I think the only way you do there, or maybe you go work camps at a particular institution and get even a more intimate view, work camps alongside with certain college coaches, get to understand exactly what they're thinking, what they're looking for in a player. And I think that can spur even more conversations. So it is. And with, every college streaming everything on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook Live, Thursday nights, Friday nights, and Sundays. It's all college soccer all the time. So there's a lot out there for coaches to educate themselves on.
There's really no excuse anymore, because if you have an ESPN Plus, or like you said, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, these streams are there and then they stay there. You don't even have to watch them live. You can watch 30 minutes of a game 3 days later, just to kind of educate and acclimate yourself to what the level looks like now. Agreed.
What are the do's and don'ts, you think, from a club coach's perspective? We can educate, tell them about the rules. We can tell them how players can send emails, and we can construct highlight playlists. Are there any other do's and don'ts, you think?
I think the biggest thing is you've got to have integrity. I have a list right now on the top of my head right now. If I called a handful of coaches that I would trust 100% sight unseen, I'm going to at least come take a look, because every kid, they're honest. They're like, "Hey, this kid, they're hardworking. They're this, and this. I don't know if they have enough talent to play for you, but I'd love for you to tell me that." So I'm not going in. They're not selling me a recruit. They're saying, "Here's what I think, but you tell me I could be wrong. Maybe you see something better in him or her." versus the ones where I pick up the phone. Oh man, this person, they're great. Like every one of their players is the best player in the world. It's like, okay, are you being honest or are you selling me? And as a club coach, you're only as good as your name. Our soccer community is so small. I guarantee we can pick up the phone and within 2 degrees of separation, we know somebody that you're talking about. So be honest. The do's and don'ts are have integrity and understand that. So that's my biggest thing.
Yeah. And it's, I think sometimes it's hard for club coaches in that way because, sometimes they're emotionally attached to a family, to a player, because they've watched this player grow and fight and scrap, that they really want to do what's in that player's best interest. And sometimes saying the truth that, hey, maybe you just don't project to this level. She's a really good player, but I just don't. So the truth is really the only way, I think, to.
Yeah. And long term, telling the truth is actually in that player's best interest, because if they end up at a school where they're just not good enough, their experience probably isn't going to be very good and they might end up in the transfer portal anyway. So what might sting a little bit right now is going to help them down the line. Now, you don't want to crush dreams because look, there's players that they have that ability to find another gear and step it up and make it. But, you just have to, like you said, be realistic and truthful.
Yeah, well, what do you think a student athlete should look for? I think that kind of, what is an ideal student athlete experience, you think? Or like during the process, yes, we understand the right fit. We understand the right academic fit, the right cultural fit, the right geographical fit. Are there any other 2 or 3 characteristics that you would comment on?
I think a lot of times overlooked is style of play and style of coaching. Some people are used to being a very strict, rigid, formations and do this, and they don't have a lot of freedom. And if they go to a school where they have too much freedom, they might suffer from what I call paralysis by analysis. They don't know where to go because they've always been told what to do. Or it could be the other way around, where maybe it's a super athletic player that would fit very well at a college that has a direct style of play, but they go to a school that values possession and tactical movement, and they're athletic, but they just don't know where to run, so they're going to struggle there. So I think style of play is often overlooked because you just want to go to the best school possible. But there are so many factors. We could spend hours going.
No, you're right, and everyone's going to have a different prioritization with each of those, with each of those factors. The one thing that I love to attend training much more so than any showcase, and most of the time I was evaluating not the player but the coach, wanting to know what that daily environment was like and project what that transition could be like, and knowing the environment where that player is coming from is such a big help in transitioning them into college and understanding what motivates them, how to coach them, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, club coach is still extremely important.
Absolutely.
A good question is, and that's kind of lead to this exposure slide here, is how do you get exposed to recruiters when you're not in a position to do so? And I think that's really, we went off the rails a couple of times, but I think the biggest way is exactly with these 4 things: is get video out there, build the profile, build social media, learn about schools, and then communicate. What do you think about when we talk about communicating and getting our name out there, besides video playlists? What do you think about social media interactions, direct messaging coaches, things like that? Do you think that's a good thing to stay away from, or you should engage in it?
I think it's changing, and whether coaches like it or not, some of the older, more veteran coaches may not be as tech savvy. But it's part of life. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with building your brand on social media. I would try to avoid sending too many direct messages if the coach isn't, if you're not getting responses from email and other things, maybe send them a DM in Twitter or Instagram, but I wouldn't bombard them. That could turn them off. But I don't think there's anything wrong with tagging them. You put a video on your social media and you tag a list of coaches. There's nothing wrong with that. And I enjoyed getting those tags at times because I still don't have to watch it, but at least I know it's there.
Yeah. No, do you think soccer college recruiting is becoming more and more similar to football and basketball?
I think all college sports are going that way. And I think that's just because that's the way society's going. I mean, I have my daughter just turned 13 and I have to put time limits on her phone just because that's how she communicates. I mean, one of her best friends is this boy named Luke, and he lives literally next door. And he spends half his time in the front yard on his skateboard. And sometimes, like, who are you talking to? Luke. And I look out the window. I was like, he's literally outside. Go outside and talk to him. And sometimes she does for hours on end. And other times she's on her phone talking to him and he's 100 yards away. That's just how society is. So we've got to embrace it as the coaches.
This is a good question, and it kind of will help us kind of wrap up here a little bit. We don't have a lot of time left, but this particular question comes from a club coach. How can you build relationships with college coaches? And let me expand on that. I think some coaches don't give other club coaches the time of day. Is there a way to break down a lot of those barriers?
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I haven't seen that a ton as far as, look, college coaches are busy. If you're trying to get 30 minutes with a college coach and they're in their middle of their preseason, you're just asking at the wrong time. But my suggestion is you build those relationships with the college coaches when they're recruiting, because when they're recruiting, they're actively looking to build relationships. So it doesn't mean go interrupt them in the middle of a game, but there's nothing wrong with, grabbing a meal afterward, or if you don't know someone, introducing yourself. You mentioned something, go work their camps, or go ask if you can just attend their spring practices. If you ask to learn from college coaches, most of them are going to say absolutely. And I can't tell you how many relationships I started by that way. I had open practices. I didn't care. I wanted people to learn because people did that for me. Mm-hmm. And so really just reaching out, being persistent, but being genuine. If you're looking to learn, people want to help you. If you're looking to just get something, it's pretty transparent.
Yeah, that's good. And we've got a couple of quick questions before we've got to kind of shut this down. What about high school coaches?
Yeah.
Do you feel like, do college coaches, do you feel ignore them, not involve them, or that they should involve them more?
I don't know that they should be involved any more or less, but I don't see high school coaches in any different light than a club coach, as they're just trying to gain exposure. I had a handful of high school coaches that said, hey, I've been following your program. I really want to reach out about this one player, because they were smart enough to know that they didn't have a roster full of kids. They had this one player who also plays club, and you can reach out to their club coach, but I want to tell you what I see in them on a day-to-day basis, and their character and their integrity, in addition to their soccer ability. And I think that's where you can almost get a better understanding from a high school coach, because they see these players 5 days a week instead of 2, 3 here and there. And they see them for long periods of time, because a lot of them are teachers as well.
Yeah, I agree. I loved the high school coaches. I thought they were invaluable, especially when you consider you're investing 120, 130, $140,000 in a player,
Right.
I think you have to know everything. I don't know if some coaches may not go to that extent.
Right.
I always wanted to, so I enjoyed the high school coaches. I thought they were an invaluable tool. Two other questions. How do you know when a college coach is recruiting? How do
I
you know when
mean,
you're being recruited?
okay, so usually, like if they're, and I don't know if I'm answering the question, if they're recruiting you or if they're out recruiting. So I'll start with assuming real quick, if they're recruiting you, you will know. Trust me. If you're being recruited by a college, they will know. They will send you an email, phone call. They'll send you a carrier pigeon if they need to get a hold of you. You'll know if you're being recruited. But I think you're asking, how do you know when college coaches are out recruiting? If you go to a lot of tournament and showcase websites, they will allow the college coaches to register ahead of time. And there's always a list of the coaches that are attending so that you can go to that list and then find the schools that might interest you, do some research, send information to those coaches, and they'll see you at that tournament or showcase.
This is a really good question too, is about junior college. So as a junior college player, has the recruiting to NCAA changed? Has it gotten better? Do you feel coaches on both the male and female side are looking more to junior colleges?
I think, I don't know that it's changed a ton. I think every college has its kind of way of doing things. You know, at some schools I've been, because we had a very good ability to get junior college players admitted into school and good financial or academic packages, it made a lot of sense. Other schools, it was nearly impossible to get transfers in because they wanted you there for 4 years. So I think it just really depends on the school. But end of the day, talent is talent. Just like in the NCAA, there are some junior colleges that are just better, and they produce student athletes going to Division 1, 2, and 3 NAI every single year, and that's what you got to look for. Can you find yourself on one of those rosters, because you know they're going to get exposure, and you just look to see where that junior college is sending their players, and that's maybe a good fit.
Yeah, I think I do think it's becoming viable. I think there's a lot more junior college players or a lot of players choosing the junior college route as a different pathway to Division 1, 2, or 3 for a lot of different reasons, especially in kind of this COVID landscape. So I think that's the best advice, is look at the history of where those junior colleges are sending players, what sort of success they've had, and that's going to give a player a pretty good indication of a possible future after that. So
a lot of coaches right now, I know we're wrapping up, but a lot of coaches right now, they are looking for more mature players. Some, even with a couple of years of experience, they're physically, mentally, emotionally have matured. And so it's definitely a viable pathway.
Yeah, no, for sure. But that hour went really fast, Diego. I think we covered a lot of different ground. But I do, before we walk away, I do want to thank you for joining us on behalf of Trace. I thought this was great for all people who Trace and those who joined us from outside our Trace family. So I do want to thank you for that.